I believe we're in, I might be a little bit hyperbolic, but the existential struggle for relevance for accounting. And primarily I look at it from, can the rules keep pace with the changing dynamics of things that are being offered, and what decision makers find important. And that is difficult, particularly on the confines of traditional double entry journal entry, right? And so I think from that perspective, we are already seeing a push of a lot more involvement of our data analytics team and a lot more reliance on them to produce that real-time reporting.
Stop. Meaning you work with numbers?
Oh, it's so much more than that.
Modernization. By streamlining the process.
So let's get right down to business.
This is The Closers.
Hey, Dave, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, great to be here, Em.
So I know one of the things we like to do here to start with is to just get our listeners a little bit more about yourself on a personal level. Hoping you can share with us something that you like to do for fun that has absolutely nothing to do with accounting.
I would say we're recording this during the Halloween season. I love Halloween. And my family and I just took a plunge in purchasing a 12-foot skeleton. So we've assembled it, we've set it up, but I'm trying not to fall off the cliff. I'm trying to still remain classy. So we put it in the side yard, and we haven't added, smoke machines or any kind of inflatables. So trying to get a balance, but I do love Halloween.
I love that. Love that you're also trying to keep it classy. I think you should go full on with like the smoke machine and the inflatables and everything. So one of the questions that I do ask every guest, it started out just to kind of like see if it was a great opener, but I love to hear everybody's responses. So curious how you refer to the holistic revenue process. Is it, order to revenue, quote to cash? Like, how do you refer to it or speak about that holistic process?
Sure. Well, Em, as a longtime listener to your podcast, I have seen some of the other answers, and I've got hopefully a new one. I'm going to say quote to renewal. And the idea being that, yes, you're receiving cash on that first payment, and that's great. But where my focus and our team's focus has been recently is how well are you set up at getting the next contract done, the next invoice, the next renewal, and really thinking about it as a customer lifetime value proposition.
I love that. And, it's interesting. We've been talking about, just on a side note, myself personally at Zora, we've been talking about this flywheel and how that customer life cycle really is far more cyclical, right? Like it used to feel very linear, but now it is more cyclical and it's an ongoing relationship. So I love the idea of working renewal into that.
It also adds some value back into, we've not only done the initial sale, but we're trying to service the customer and do right by them and continue to deliver value.
Yeah, exactly. So let's jump into your business and what you're doing now. Tell us a little bit about ConstructConnect. What's the business model, size and stage of the company, and like what are you kind of working on now that has you interested?
So I would say we are a mid-size software as a service company offering services in the pre-construction space. So we are providing content. So think about bids and plans and specs, and also estimation tools to help trade contractors win the right bids. For a lot of these customers, it's not just about finding the right bids, but getting and winning the correct ones. So it's a multi-sided network that also serves general contractors and even building product manufacturers. Building product manufacturers love to see where are their products getting scoped, who's utilizing them, what are the contacts there. So it really is a multi-sided network. We provide the content that helps them, makes it easier for them to win those bids. We're also a well-established, profitable operating unit within an SEC registrant, Roper Technologies. And currently, one of the things we're working on kind of gets back to the first question a bit, is we're exploring price realization on our renewal quotes. And as we migrate customers from legacy products to sort of one unified platform that provides sort of the best content out there. Our company really took off as a roll-up of 8 different businesses. And so bringing those together and providing the value for the customers, what it's really all been about.
Wow. And so you are the controller, right? How do you and your team kind of play into all of that? What is the role that you guys are playing right now?
Our role, I see it, there's the traditional accounting. So in terms of things we cover, obviously we talked about quote to renewal, but we also do purchase to pay, hire to retire, and then some various other processes. So one of the big roles that we're playing, particularly on this quote to renewal, is owning and controlling the product catalog and helping our go-to-market teams sort of realize their vision, but in a way that can scale.
So interesting. And so one of the things, and because you've listened to the podcast, which I love, by the way, you probably have heard this concept that keeps coming up about how finance teams work cross-functionally with some of the other teams. And so curious, sort of like, how you and your team, how you guys kind of work with some of those other cross-functional teams and maybe some of the unique challenges that you are coming across and how you're solving for those.
We have set up in our processes and policies, really checkpoints that facilitate a lot of good conversation and discussion. For example, as we're going to market or we're thinking about pricing, we've put some sort of tollgates in place where we're the ones controlling the product catalog and how that's configured, what our salespeople are allowed to sell in the confines of that. But we're working with the rest of the business, and we sort of have a regular rhythm to discuss, what are you all thinking? And this includes not just the sales function, but also the product function and our development. So we do provide these kind of cross-functional tollgates that also serve as a policy role. So we don't have people sort of going off on their own. And so those are really our best opportunities to kind of get the entire business together outside of normal planning and budgeting and functions like that.
Yeah. And I love the idea of you're setting the policies from a finance perspective that you need to do, right? But doing it, being informed by some of those cross-functional teams. I'd be curious if you find that, having that relationship and getting that input, if that makes it easier to enforce some of those policies.
It does. And I would tell you that, when we do have the conversations, I do find that what tends to work well for accounting also tends to work well commercially. And I can have and engage some of these conversations where I'm actually asking commercial questions, but I'm backed up by the fact that, well, actually, this works great for scale. This works great for me. And especially when we talk about, the way our systems are structured, these systems are designed to work somewhat seamlessly and more easily if you've got a good, repeatable go-to-market strategy. And so I found that I rarely have to lean into this has to work for accounting or think about internal controls or otherwise. We're able to keep that in the background while having the good, commercial negotiations in the foreground.
I heard you mention like procure to pay, hire to retire. How do you structure your teams and how do you think about that, covering all of those different areas?
Yeah. So we've really organized and continue to be organized by process. That was initially a bit of a struggle. As I mentioned, one of the challenges we had was you're coming together as 8 businesses. You had 8 different functions. And it really did, I think the initial thinking is well, we've got our way of doing it, and we've got this, and organizing by product line, which some people just have to do. We got lucky, I think, that our goal was to pull all this together. We had a very strong vision set out by, really from our CEO down, regarding one place and one set of processes. We knew that's what was going to deliver the value to the customer. And so being able to reiterate that and use that to say, regardless of geography, regardless of product line, we're going to form around these processes, and then try to drive kind of best and brightest of those processes so we can get to one sort of unified approach across our team.
I love that. And then I'm also curious, as a follow-up to that, how you and your team work with the accounting and finance teams at Roper, or, the mothership. Are there any specific challenges that you've sort of run into, or things that you've been working on, and curious how you've kind of worked around those as all of those businesses have kind of come together?
I think we have a really good relationship. Roper is similar to other high-level parent-type relationships where it's very hands-off. We have a lot of freedom of movement operationally. The governance level, it feels more like it's a nice thing to fall back on to have, but it's not overly pushy. And so the relationship there is great. They do have a lot of different types of businesses, but they have been getting more and more into software as a service. That's something is our bread and butter. And so, part of what they're looking to do is right now is enhance their disclosures around backlog, around annual recognized revenue, and ARR. And so we're assisting with that. And so, trying to work through from our own side how to report on the changes in ARR, and how that then in turn can assist with Roper being able to improve their disclosures to get more information out there to their investors.
And I know you were on another podcast where you mentioned that you guys closed the books in 3 days, which I know would probably floor some folks. I imagine it maybe wasn't always that way from day one, but wondering if you can tell me a little bit more about that.
I will first admit that, we have the benefit of being a subsidiary of an SEC reporter. So in terms of the 10Ks, 10Qs, we get some relief on that. We're still providing some of the data that goes into it, but generally our close is ending when we're providing information into the consolidation. But we have been able to reduce our close time dramatically. As I mentioned, thinking about it from an overall process as opposed to different business lines, paid off quite a bit. But really, it's been a philosophy of mine for quite some time is thinking about it as a symphony, and thinking about it as you're orchestrating a lot of these instruments to work in concert in the right times. And there's a lot of inherent sort of handoffs and things that occur. For me, the first step was sort of visualizing the whole close. And I remember one night, very large whiteboard and sketching everything out that as we look through it. And then it was about cutting and distributing to minimize the downtime. We found ourselves that we had sort of one person owning a full process. And so they would have, moments where they were not able to work on things. And so minimizing that involved some more handoffs, which then involves more trust between the people, working very closely together and keeping, each other updated. The other thing we did is I kind of set a mantra of let's value 1 hour of close time for 1.5 hours outside of close. And that has really helped us think about what really needs to happen during that close cycle. What can be pulled out of it? What can be prepared in advance? And what we also found is from a process standpoint, moving to things like reconciling the bank on a daily basis, they're just good control procedures as well. You're not building things up. After every close, we gather everybody in a room for a brief meeting, and we would agree on 3 actions to get better next time. Not 15, not, 1, 3 things, and then we would do those. And then we'd get back and we'd do another 3. And so by doing that, sort of setting an aggressive target and then thinking through it, has just chipped away at it over time.
There's something to be said for when everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. So I love that you pick 3 and you stuck to 3, because it makes it much more doable. And then people continue to want to do that rather than, first time if you come out of the gate with 9 things you got to do better and you only reach like 1 or 2 because you're trying to do everything, it kind of falls flat. People don't feel as excited to make those improvements the next time.
That's
but
right.
It's really great to hear that you've done that. I also love the symphony, the orchestration of how you think about all the things that need to get done.
Yes, that definitely helps. And as a visual person, I think for me, getting it out there and seeing all the different steps and being able to organize them and rearrange them in a way that works best is at least how I'm able to do it.
Curious if we can shift a little bit to what kind of trends or changes are you seeing within the business?
I'll give you a couple of items. The first one is we've got one kind of set of our products that's been traditionally sold as a perpetual license.
Mm-hmm.
And really starting this year as a glide path to SaaS, we've started selling them on a term basis. And what that results in is, from a revenue recognition standpoint, we're still recognizing, upon delivery. But for our management reporting, we want to, show this as a recurring revenue opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's one of probably many bridge items that we have between our external reporting and our management reporting. When we first started with this, it's okay, let's keep it on a spreadsheet and see how it goes. But we've been able to get to an off-ramp where we can sort of build this natively within our system, so that we're able to deliver the things that we need to externally without any bumps in the road, but working very closely with our data teams to sort of build logic that allows us to do both.
It's really interesting stuff, especially because RevRec is so close to my heart. Sometimes I hear about these changes or shifts or transitions, and the first thing I think of is, oh gosh, how are they going to do that from a RevRec perspective? But I like sort of that bridge, as you called it, starting with management reporting first, because it doesn't necessarily change your RevRec today from a term perspective for external reporting, but internally kind of thinking about what that means and what kind of visibility that gives you. On your LinkedIn profile, I see that you mentioned that you led an organization from failing to passing grade on internal audit, inclusive of IT security. Would love if you could tell us a little bit more about how you work with internal audit, but especially in the areas that maybe aren't related directly to accounting. And how did you even get into that?
As with most things, it's a bit out of necessity. As the internal audit gets conducted and moves up the line, as you could imagine, to an audit committee or otherwise, we really are getting sort of one grade. And as accountants, we love green, yellow, red, or ABC type grading. That one grade is inclusive of the IT security, and so I just found it incumbent, as the kind of overall owner of that grade and really just that desire to get green. I remember we actually had a mantra, green in 19 was our goal. We worked with our colleagues across the aisle on the IT side, and we just saw the benefit of having a sort of a well-rounded internal control environment. As we were having these meetings and such, it doesn't matter if the journal entry gets approved, if somebody can just go into the back end tables and change everything. And so really embracing that and its connection back to what you're trying to achieve really got us in the right mindset. When I found the way that for me was just, I was constantly Googling, in terms, okay, what does this mean? What does that mean? I would imagine that's even easier these days, with AI tools. In fact, I find myself using those quite a bit as I look to, let's say pay invoices. Okay, what is this thing doing? Explain it to me like I'm 5. And so, it was a really good educational.
So it sounds overall like you're a big fan of, let's just say, accounting technology, right? Thinking about things that you've done. Could you share with us or talk about maybe one of the biggest accounting technology challenges that you've faced so far in your career and what that sort of led to?
Sure. Yeah, so I'll tell the story of when I first came on board here at ConstructConnect. One of our biggest challenges within close was getting to our revenue recognition, and it was quite an effort. I remember in particularly, we were trying to close out the quarter in June of a year. So it was on July 4th, I recall working, into the night. And that's when, jokingly, I said to myself and my colleague, I want to declare my independence from being here on spreadsheets. And, a lot of it's waiting for refreshes and loads and that sort of thing. And so, we really early on started to embrace some of the basic and universal data transformation tools that are out there. And for our purposes, using first good outputs from our system, but then using transformations like Power Query or otherwise really helped to shape the way that we were building that. And I think part of that was I got a really good lesson and learned what I would say almost a new skill set that I didn't have going in. I'd been doing this now for 23 years, and coming out of school, I learned my debits and credits. And I was fortunate enough to be on the first iteration of Sarbanes-Oxley. So I got a good understanding of process, risks, and controls. That was very early in my career. When I got here, I felt like, kind of that old dog, new tricks type of thing where I had to learn a new way to think. And the way to think was around, the data, how the data moves through the system, how we transform it, how we summarize it. And by thinking that new way, by learning that new way to think, that was the break point that gets us to where we can now do it in about 30 minutes.
And I have to say, there is something data. So it's funny, accounting teams talking to cross-functional teams is a common theme here on the podcast, but data is also another area that always comes up. And I think you're so smart to sort of be open to learning what that is, because when you can understand how your data flows through the system, you know what the dependencies are. It's so much easier to start making some true progress in improving processes or, kind of figuring out where you could even make some of those improvements. And when we go to help some of our customers, the ones who understand what their data flows look like and how they work, it really helps to expedite a lot of the work that needs to be done. I'm curious how you kind of think about technology overall and what advice you might give to accounting leaders and professionals, especially when stepping into a new role, how they might think about considering automation.
I think for us, and I was very fortunate, my boss, the CFO, made a very big emphasis on skills development very early on and consistently. We would have no mouse Fridays, where we would have to work without our mouse by our side, and we had a lot of Excel type style guide rules that sort of self-enforced, as well as just continuous learning, and really made it a habit, even more so than some of the things that we wanted to do. So I at first I was like, we need a new T&E system, or we need this or that. And instead, by learning some of these basics skills, it reinforced sort of the data conversation we were just having. But in addition to that, it really empowered our team to be able to understand and make the transformations that we needed to do things like closing the books or otherwise. A lot of what accountants face is really, extract, transform, load. And by getting really good at those skills and using some of the new tools and the new automation that has come through, that has been an area that's helped us out probably the most. I will relay one story. We had an innovation contest for our team. So this was across the team, including our clerical staff or otherwise. They would form into groups of 2. And the idea was, pick something that you are actually doing, and we're going to judge it on 3 criteria. So, the criteria would be how close is it to being done? What is the level of impact? And also, what's the presentation look like, right? And so when it came to the level of impact, we gave additional points if they were able to actually implement it. And I recall one moment that was great. We had 2 of our staff members on their own sought out kind of a AI builder that would take remittance advices that we would receive, and it would extract them from the email, put them into Excel spreadsheet, and then help us with matching our wire transfers that came in for that day.
Wow.
And we just all looked around and we're like, how did you all do this? And they said, well, we had these certain skills, but then it kind of got us excited. We were coaching them along the way, but just this moment of awe. And I just remember all of us just being so proud. So it's, really was about, you empower the people, you give them the right tools, and, they're able to do a lot with it.
What do you think revenue accounting is then going to look like 10 years from now?
Yeah, I think about this a lot. And, I believe I might be a little bit hyperbolic, but the existential struggle for relevance for accounting. And primarily I look at it from, can the rules keep pace with the changing dynamics of things that are being offered, and what decision makers find important. And so, things like what we're seeing in the speed to market that is needed, the ability to report the connecting from a lead all the way to that revenue entry, and that is difficult, particularly on the confines of traditional double entry journal entry, right?
Yep.
And so, I think from that perspective, we are already seeing a push of a lot more involvement of our data analytics team and a lot more reliance on them to produce that real-time reporting. And so we sort of see this as a crossroads for accounting for our team. But really, it's not all grim. And I would say that, the things we talked about earlier in terms of being more strategic, being involved cross-functionally, of thinking about the data that is available and how that comes through into your systems. That's really where I think we have a unique opportunity, given our position, given our level of trust, to really be and make an impact for the future as accountants.
Okay, Dave, last question. What kind of things do you think we as accountants should be thinking more about, or recommendations that you would make to accountants to really, spend time thinking about and doing?
Thought about this with my team recently as we kind of had a bit of a retreat, and we're really trying to think about, like, what are some of the ways that we've been successful and some of the ways we can continue to be successful. And so, particularly for revenue accountants, I think I kind of call it controlling your flanks. And what I mean by that is really thinking through the inputs that come through to the revenue accountants. It's not just about the ultimate journal entry and, how you're getting there, but, how you're thinking about you get to that point. And so, I kind of had 5 things that we've done and been working on that I think have been pretty helpful. So our first was, we've created what we call, order to cash, or quote to renewal, if we're using that term, persona. So we took the 5 to 7 most highest used situations, and we've just illustrated, we picked a real transaction, and we said, how does it work, through the system? And that includes, what are they buying? And what does that delivery look like? And that even included things like listening to some of the sales calls and understanding how that product is coming to be. What systems are they touching? How does the quote come together? How does the sales order come together? What is the rev rec, but also how does that display with other metrics like, ARR, bookings, deferred revenue. And so those types of ways of thinking at it and picking real transactions and then presenting it in a way that's very easy to read has been a nice sort of grounding force for us as we have, any further conversations. In addition to that, thinking about the product catalog and controlling that, as we spoke about earlier, but really having a strong position or even ownership position in that, and using it as a kind of a leverage point within the organization to get everybody together, but making sure that you've kind of got, and you're getting your deals towards that product catalog that allows you to scale. In addition to that, owning, or at least being involved with any kind of bespoke contracts. And also understanding what is the customer trying to get out of this has really allowed us to get into, what I call is kind of that 31 flavors type of thing, where it's not, you can do anything. It's, you can do, these certain things, and we can achieve most of the customer's goals without necessarily having to make everything a one-off or everything unique. The last thing I'll mention is thinking about that renewal. And so that's where we've been really focused recently is, what type of uplift do you have? What does that renewal experience look like? And how do we make sure that we remain at scale on that second, that third, beyond contracts? So those are some of the things that I would, kind of recommend as you're thinking about controlling around, the system, controlling around the processes, and not just, okay, how do I get my SSP and how do I get my journal entry?
Yeah, it's awesome. You guys have done a wonderful job. Dave, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a true pleasure chatting with you, and I really look forward to having you back again. And I am going to hunt you down for that picture of the 12-foot skeleton. And listeners, my DMs are always open to you. Please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn at mdaigle. Links are in the show notes, and please stay in touch for more episodes and insights from other revenue and accounting leaders. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time.
This podcast is brought to you by Zora Revenue. Automate revenue recognition for any business model, enabling your teams to reconcile and report on revenue in real time.
Listeners, my DMs are always open to you. Please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn at mdaigle, that's EMDAIGLE, and follow me for insights that help accounting leaders grow in their career, modernize their teams, and ultimately become more influential partners in business. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.